Good morning and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode number 120 in an ongoing series of live broadcasts designed for folks who are eager and craving to get better at being who they be and not distracted by merely getting better at doing what they do. If you'll do me a favor, take just a moment. Again, the Be Live app seems to have gone a little bananas, so this is having trouble with the original link that was in the email. So if you will, take a quick moment and press the share button just underneath this video and share this with your community. The more voices we have in the conversation, the richer it is. Mario, nice to see you, and Marianne and Terry and David here. Good morning. So this is, I'll give you a preview. This is the quote that I want to play with today. And I've noticed I am not by nature a very patient person. I tend to want the answers quickly. I tend to want them now. And I tend to skew towards things where I can find those things. I notice that some of those quick answers tend towards being the easier ones and not likely the best answers. I'm learning that it would serve me better is a lesson that Rilke gives us in this quote. The idea that have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Live in the question. And my realization is not merely that I need to give more time to the process. What resonated so deeply with me in her quote was that one word, the word heart. Right? Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. By turning over the unsolved in my head, I do careen towards an answer. I do get the answer. I spent a great deal of time in my head growing up. Wicked smart, tons of rewards and accolades and pats on the head for being smart. But that's not where my power is. When I hold the unsolved in my heart, when I live into that question longer, the answers that come up are always better, truer, deeper, richer. The answers that sit on the surface, the ones that I can quickly and easily discern with my mind, um, in the long run, they don't serve. At least not for me. And again, this is my experience. My job here and what I do during these episodes is share my experience, my lived experience, my way of being in and seeing the world. And so I'm always curious, and please use the comments. I know there's a slight time lag, a la Facebook. But yeah, please. My experience is that when I live in my head, I get answers. Sometimes they're really good answers. But the harder the question, I find the more useless the answer that I can quickly pull in my head. And no matter how deep I go noodling on it, it's only a hollow victory. The truth for me always comes from holding that unsolved, mulling over that question in my heart, seeking my truth and the true answer and the deeper answer, and not merely relying on what I can figure out. It's what I can feel out. Several of the folks that are on this broadcast this morning know a woman named Wendy Sorello. Um, one of her sons was in a fraternity at San Diego State. And I love this story because this freshman, like the rest of the pledge class, was forced to arrange an event for the seniors. It didn't matter what the event was, they just had to put it together, pull it off. Man, this kid was asking question after question after question after question. And one of the brothers looked at him and said, "Dude, stop asking me questions. FITFO." And he was like, "Okay, what?" FITFO is an acronym for figure it the fuck out. And Wendy shared this with us in the context of us trying to support her putting together this event. Fitfo, figure it the fuck out. Well, I realized after playing with that for a lot longer, there's really the other piece, which is feel it the fuck out. Feel it out, not figure it out. A lot of the times for me, I don't need to figure anything out. I need to feel it out. And right now, with what's going on in the United States and what's spilling over to other countries in support of what this country is aching through and striving through and growing through and can no longer ignore, figuring things out has not worked. Logicking our way out of this, explaining or white-splaining our way out of this is not going to work. It hasn't worked for 401 years. It's not going to get any better. There's so many places in my world where when I try to figure it out, I get stuck. Not coming up for an answer. But it's spinning my wheels doing the same thing and explaining myself back into it and convincing myself back into it and figuring out new ways that just end up spinning my wheels and keeping me stuck. I did it for a couple of years in my coaching practice. And what I notice is the more I get stuck trying to figure it out, the more I'm eager to find other people's ways of solving it. So, ooh, what if I try that? Ooh, what if I try that? And I can logic myself into trying all these neat new ideas that keep me just where I am. Stuck in that never-ending flight circling Dallas. And I noticed the difference. When I figure out an answer, I then start trying to figure out all the little bits and pieces of what needs to be done and what I need to do to take the next step. When I feel it out and I feel the answer and the truth surfaces, I'm unstoppable. I don't have to figure out all the how. I start acting, I start moving, I start driving forward. And I watch the inertia of what's happening right now. Granted, for centuries of energy behind the movements that are happening. I even watch these two young kids in our neighborhood who put together and rallied a protest for our neighborhood that ended up in a march yesterday, moving through and around our neighborhood and rallying folk to come out. They didn't try to figure anything out. They said, this is what we'll be doing and where we'll be and why we are. And word spread. I've seen so many things that were attempted to be organized and figured out. And they were meh. But what I'm struck by this week is I look back at this quote and play with this idea. What I'm struck by is how powerful it is when we figure it the fuck out. When we live in that question and turn it over in our heart, how much more powerful the answers are and how much deeper and richer the outcome is. David said, I find the intellectual process can be useful and it's not always deep. Heart feeling gets below the surface. David, it's amazing how much difference there is when you cover the distance from head to heart. That 18-inch spread is all the difference. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and okay, I just noticed that I totally went into my head trying to figure out why it is that I keep jumping into my head instead of staying in the heart. I know that answer. I feel that answer. I was trained to do that. In the last 12, 13 years of my journey in becoming a professional coach has been fighting over 4 decades of training to live in my head and to figure stuff out. And I notice how quickly I go right back there. Yeah, and Mario shared a link to Heart Math. Amazing. It's funny. There was a movie called I Am, the documentary, and it was by um, ah, Tom Shadyac. And that was the first time I was introduced to the Heart Math Institute because they were presented there. And I know, Mary Virginia, you're doing some work with Heart Math with one of the apps that they've got and studied some with them. I have a lot of friends who have gone deep into their programming. I have a super shallow experience with Heart Math so far. Everything has clicked for me that I've experienced. That's one of the next places that I want to dive in. So yeah, I will, Mario, I will definitely be playing more with that. And thank you. Um, yeah, the mindfulness, pause and observe without judgment. Let the question float without holding them. Oh my God, Mary Virginia, just that little piece in the middle, without judgment. You know, I play a lot with the gaps. I've even got us to talk about it in the introduction in my book. That idea of that gap between when we're triggered and when we notice, right? And there's where mindfulness lives, and that in closing that gap, and then that gap between when we notice and when we choose something different. But there's some subtle power in that piece right in the middle. It's once one has noticed, you notice without judgment, or does one instantly put judgment onto it? And the power in that transition from closing the gap between when you are triggered and when you notice, and when you notice and when you choose something different, that place in the middle, the pivotal moment of whether you tip over into choosing something different or just remain in that noticing stage, is whether or not you can peel off judgment and notice with with emotionless discernment and blameless discernment. Just notice and name it without judgment. I don't think judgment lives here. I think blameless discernment does live in our heart. It's our head that attaches meaning and attaches judgment and attaches blame. And I mean judgment in the connotative sense, not the denotative sense. Yeah, yeah, Mary Virginia, I'll take you up on that. Thank you. But and Mindy Niss, who runs the Heart Path in Sedona every year, the science behind the power of the heart. Robin, I don't know about Mindy, but I'll definitely be looking her up after this broadcast. So that's the piece. It's being willing to dive into your heart and hold the unsolved questions there and play with the ideas there and allow the truth to surface. Allow your truth to surface and stop trying to figure it the fuck out. And how about feel it the fuck out? Give yourself the chance to feel it and let that deeper truth surface. So, bound to be a remarkable week this week. Everything is changing on a daily basis. Again, particularly in this country, but the energy is moving out. There is no going back. Look, there was no going back to before what things were like in January before the pandemic, and there's certainly no going back to the way things were culturally in this country before George Floyd. There is an awakening, and people are paying attention, not with their heads, but with their hearts, because this is important this time. The opportunity for this week maybe isn't to decide what mindset you'll choose, but what heart set you'll choose. What truth will you hold? What truth will you seek? What will you hold in your heart this week? So between now and next week, what heart set will you choose?